Welcome back to my channel. My name is Carly Stevens. This is Carly Stevens Books for all things writing, publishing, and indie author life. And I am really excited to have Noah Gambee here to talk about what writers get wrong about tech, because tech is obviously such an important part of all of our worlds, and writers get a lot of it wrong. So, anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about your background? Like what qualifies you to be somebody who can speak to this? Like what mistakes people make with tech?
Yeah. So I am a software developer would be my official job title, I guess. So I work for a company. We do mostly web apps and then native apps, which are like the apps that go on your phone. Um, and so that's my job as I build those out. I work on both sides of it. So in web development, there are these terms like front end and back end. Front end is what like the user is interacting with. Back end is like how the data is handled and that kind of thing. So I work on both sides, and that's generally referred to as full stack development. Um, and so working in that field exposes me to a lot of parts of tech, not everything. Like you said, tech is a massive field. It's a big umbrella. Um, but outside of work, my family is very techy. My dad, growing up was always very interested in tech and kind of on the cutting edge of things. So I remember, him bringing home the first phone that I ever saw with like a internet browser on it, and it was like this big. Um, but he was always up on that kind of stuff, and so through him, I learned a lot. It's just always been something I've been interested in. So I try to keep up to date on the latest news. I'm definitely not up to date on everything, um, but I will do my best to answer your questions.
I mean, you're up to date on many things. It's hard to keep up with the rate at which tech is developing in so many different directions
Yeah.
and all of that. And, full disclosure, Noah's also my brother-in-law, as well as being, an expert in his field. So it really worked out well that we were able to have this conversation today.
expert
So
expert is very generous of you, but
I, I,
yes.
I I mean, compared to most of us, I don't think it's an overstatement at all. And you're somebody who likes really digging into whatever it is that you're doing, and so I'm going to give you the assumption that you know more than is technically required for the day to day.
Sure.
Like you said, you have that history with your family as well as your job and your interests and things like that.
Yeah. And to your point, it is truly impossible to stay up to date on everything, even in my own field. I mean, I'm on some Reddit pages and stuff where people are talking about kind of the latest tech that I would consider using in my day to day, and it's just constant the changes and improvements. And oftentimes, I don't end up learning about a lot of it until I need it. um, so yeah, it's very hard to keep up. I think probably more than almost any other field. It's rapidly evolving.
Okay, well, we we know that yes, things are constantly changing, and sometimes it's kind of funny to watch, you know, you've got mail or something, and there's all this outdated tech. But what are some common misconceptions or just flat out mistakes that you see in, TV shows, movies, books? Like
Yeah.
what stands out to you like a sore thumb?
When when we first talked about this and you kind of asked me that question, the first thing that popped into my head is I love, and it doesn't like annoy me when some of these things are wrong. Sometimes I think that they're funny, or they serve the story. But one that I do find really funny is oftentimes in TV shows or movies or stuff where somebody is hacking into something or is taking control of some kind of device. They have this like really pretty visual interface. Like I watched a Mission Impossible recently, and they are like he's like move the elevator to the 16th floor, and like on his screen he like drags the elevator thing, and it's like this big 3D render, and that does not happen. I mean, 99% of anything like that. I mean, you're just working in some kind of terminal and it's just all text. You're just writing out commands in text. And the only reason that there would be some fancy visual interface is if somebody had built it and you somehow had access to that, but um, that's not how it works. So that's one of my favorite ones is seeing some like really funny, you know, 90s tech displayed on the computer as they're hacking it or whatever. I'm sure
Right,
you've
the
seen it.
Godzilla 99 Godzilla with the little fish icon that's supposed to draw. Yeah, yeah, those I guess it's for the audience to have something
Yeah,
more to see, but that's not true to life at all, you're saying?
totally. Yeah, it wouldn't be fun to stare at an actual developer's computer 99% of the time. It's just lines of text that look like gibberish. So I totally get why they do it. But that's one that always makes me giggle. Um, there's so many. I think another like super cliche one is like where somebody's like enhance like on an
Yes, I
image
love
or
that.
whatever. Mhm.
So, like,
I think
security
that
camera
one's
footage and things like that, you're saying?
yeah, yeah, or they like it's often like the reflection of something else. So they like have a security cam footage of like a car, and then the side mirror of the car is like the reflection of the license plate behind them or whatever. I feel like that one's become so cliche that even like non-tech people kind of scoff at that one now. But yeah, that's definitely not how resolution works. There are definitely software that will clean up like artifact, like some digital artifact that happens in compression or file sharing. But if the pixels weren't picked up in the camera, you can't just find them suddenly. So that's one that I like a lot.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
just when I was thinking about things that are common misconceptions, that those were well, uh not the first one, but the enhance came to mind
mhm,
for me, and I'm technologically literate, but, I don't build apps or know any sort of coding or anything, so I think that one's
yeah,
pretty well known.
absolutely. Another big one is I don't know what you would call it, but I feel like oftentimes writers there will be somebody who works in some form of tech, and then they kind of become relied on for like anything relating to tech for the rest of the story. And as we were just talking about, tech is huge. And like I don't work in cybersecurity. So if I was on some adventure and somebody was like, "We need you to hack into this," like it's gonna take me a long time, and I'm gonna mostly just be googling. And that's not how it works. Just because
Mm,
have a computer science degree or you work in one field of tech or another, you don't automatically know how to work in or even understand the rest of those fields. And I feel like I see that a lot where somebody just gets pulled into anything relating to tech because they are somewhat affiliated with it. Like this one man army tech genius thing is definitely not accurate.
mm. That's not one that I would've thought about, I guess, but that's the benefit of of hearing these things. Now that you say it, of course, that makes sense. Do you think that
Yeah.
w w do you have any sense of, like, what the kind of big categories are of people if they are working in the industry? Like, is it separated by programming language or, like you were saying, front end, back end, or what are some of those big categories that people could actually work in, with
Hmm.
some proficiency?
Definitely programming language, but I think the big separator in media is hardware versus software. So there'll be somebody who like is a developer or whatever, and then they need to like reprogram a robot like with wires and like they're opening control panels and stuff. And that is extremely rare that somebody does both of those things. Like that's a totally different field, like working in electronics and hardware and systems engineering at that like highest level is so separate from like people who are writing code. So I feel like that's the biggest separator that I see
Mm,
in books and TV and stuff. But aside from that, programming languages for sure can be a separator, but not as big of one as you might think actually, because
mm,
once you've learned a couple languages, unless it's one that's like very very different, it's quite a bit easier to kind of get the grasp on newer languages. So that happens to me somewhat often, where we're working with a client and they have some old piece of software that's written in something that I've not used before, but we're taking it over for some reason, and it's usually not. the end of the world to kind of translate that into something that you're more familiar with. Um, Especially with AI nowadays, ChatGPT is really good at that. You can say, "Take this code and translate it into another code that I know," and it's really good at that.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, so let's
um,
talk more about AI. It's obviously a huge topic now,
yeah.
for many reasons. And so I was wondering, first of all, there are several movies and books and things that I've consumed that have kind of an AI at the center of it, causing some chaos or controlling, all of the electronic computers and phones and everything all over the world, wherever it goes.
Mhm.
How legitimate is that kind of setup, that AI could actually infiltrate this mass quantity of tech all over?
Mhm. It's a hard question. There are definitely people out there who are far more educated about AI than me, who are afraid of this thing that they often refer to as, like, the singularity, which is my understanding is, like, AI is kind of, um, catching up to us, and they become kind of self-sufficient, I think is kind of the most basic description of that, but then I think there are people who are more realists who say that's impossible or we're really far away from that. I think even outside of AI, just this whole idea that all systems are interconnected is very much exaggerated in writing. People are accessing these extremely remote or highly secure connections, and you know everything is not just talking to each other constantly. There are secure systems that are totally, disconnected from the worldwide internet, and those kind of systems, AI is not going to be able to just suddenly get access to. Um, so yeah, I think hopefully very unrealistic. Also like AIs don't have personalities, they don't have goals. Like they,
Mm,
if you have a villain of an AI in a movie, I'm assuming it has some kind of goal in mind. It's got some kind of motivation, and you know, any AI that's been developed, as far as I know, it doesn't have that. It's not programmed to have any like desires. So I think that would kind of be like the fundamental piece that you would need in order for there to be some kind of malicious AI that takes over the world.
mm. So there would have to be some kind of programmed end goal, like not coming from the artificial intelligence itself, but from something outside that could kind of guide some uh connected things, but not everything like we see with I feel like there was a Mission Impossible that dealt with that. Was it the latest Mission Impossible that had
Yeah, it
that?
was it was the latest one. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm trying to remember what exactly that was,
I
but
remember everyone madly were putting things into typewriters and this older tech just so that it couldn't be accessed by
yeah,
this malicious, centralized, kind of virus-like
exactly.
AI.
Yeah, they were like anything that could possibly be, touch the internet, like this
Mhm,
AI is going to gain control over. Um, and yeah, I don't think that's possible. I mean, it would have to get through the security measures of every internet protocol that exists, and maybe someday it'll be fast enough to do that. I think a big part of this too that's often overlooked is like you have to have computational power to drive all of this stuff. Like it
mm,
doesn't just exist like, in the ether, like there is somewhere a computer that has to have the kind of brute force to be able to make these computations. And for something to be that powerful, we don't have I don't think we have the server capability or the just raw computing power for that to even be possible yet.
mm,
Um, but it's funny you bring up that Mission Impossible movie because it's like I feel like these kind of vague AI things they are vague and they don't like stick in my brain very well. They kind of all like run together.
mhm,
Um, like I think it becomes a little bit to me personally, like it becomes a little bit of a cop out, like to have that as your your main villain, maybe. It's like this all powerful, like it's basically God, you know?
Right, that's how I felt watching, Captain America: Civil War. It's like, well, what do
Okay.
you do if it's this intelligence that can just take over anything and become embodied in that thing and where it's yeah, I mean, I see why people are framing AI as kind of the boogeyman,
Yeah,
but I agree, it does feel a bit like, "Oh, I know what we can do for this world-ending stake
yeah.
situation." Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Totally.
that's
Yeah, and I think like AI, they're not, any kind of emotion or personality that it might display has been programmed in to be that way. Like they are not self-aware, even if they appear to be. They only appear to
mm.
be that way so that it's, easier, more comfortable for us to interact with them, I think, right now. But they're not actually, like we said, they don't actually have any kind of desires or emotion that could drive any of these decisions.
Well, that's gotta be comforting to some to some people out there
Yeah.
who are thinking about there was a book that I read a couple years ago with an AI that becomes conscious over the course of the book and ends up doing these atrocious things. It's the Illumini files, for anybody who's read that. But it was very interesting to see how it goes from being this programmed to protect the spaceship entity to being this actual like person, something with personality by the end.
Mhm.
But where if that ever were to be, you're saying that that's unlikely and a long way off.
I hope so. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I am not an AI developer. I've never trained an AI model. But from my understanding of it, there would need to be some very significant changes to kind of the foundation of how AI is being built right now,
Mm,
for that to be any kind of possibility. Even ChatGPT, I think it's ChatGPT 4 is kind of their newer model that does have the capability of going out to the internet to find you answers for things. Whereas like the last model, it was trained on the internet, but it was cut off at like 2021 or something. Um, but the newest one can go out to the internet, but it can't like log into a website for you and check your email. It can't like click on a thing, click obviously, or it can't navigate through a website because they are not allowing it to do that,
mm,
for privacy and security reasons.
yeah.
So that's kind of one of those pillars that they're developing these things based on right now that would have to be very dramatically shifted for an AI to just be let loose.
So you don't program these things. You program apps and things like that for your phone. So
Hmm.
obviously apps we all have them. We've all probably seen some teen movies where people come up with some school-wide app overnight and things like that. About
Hmm.
how long does it take to develop? I'm sure it depends app to app, but if you have a fairly simple app, about how long does it take to program it and make the interface look good and have it downloadable?
Yeah, it's like you said, it can vary drastically. But there are so many kind of out of the box solutions now,
Hmm.
that people can use that you could have something simple up and running in hours if you know what you're doing.
Oh, so that's like
For
so I
sure.
I figured that was just silliness, but if you have something that's simple and you have the right tools, you can actually get something up in a few hours.
Totally.
Wow.
Yeah. If you know what you're doing, there's lots of steps of configuration and little intermediate things along the way that you would have to know just kind of from experience. But if you wanted, an app that was just a simple form or something to collect some data, um, and have it look, pretty-ish, that's something that I could have ready in a few hours probably. Yeah. But on the flip side of that, we had a project last year at my company that involved connecting to like a piece of hardware, and that one took like a year to build. And so it can hugely vary. But yeah, it's not out of the question at all that somebody could have something cool looking going pretty fast. There's so many packages and libraries now that you just kind of plug into your foundation of your app that will get things going for you really fast.
That That is honestly very surprising. I thought you were going to crush that idea like a bug, no, it takes days, it takes weeks.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
On average, it definitely does. But if somebody knows what they're doing and they were in a big rush, and it wasn't anything too complicated, then yeah, it's not out of the question that somebody could pull an all-nighter and get something going. I've done it for sure.
Okay, so, before we wrap things up, we
Yeah,
have to talk about the hacker trope, the click a few keys, I'm in, the hacker kid
totally.
from Jurassic Park kind of situation. Now I'm going to I assume that you don't, you know, you're not a hacker by night and a
I am
programmer
not.
by day, but these are just assumptions.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense of how difficult hacking into a secure system actually would be, or the level of skill that you would need to develop before you'd be able to do something on that scale?
Um, I don't know if I have a great sense for that part of it. I'm sure it depends on the system, but a comment that I do have that I think is often overlooked is that a huge amount of modern hacking is done through other channels than just pulling up your laptop and getting into somebody's IP address. And yeah, there's a lot of social engineering that goes into it. It's more often than not how these big hacker groups are getting into these highly secure systems, highly secure in quotes. Um, I don't know if you heard like a few weeks ago in Las Vegas, I think it was MGM resorts were hacked.
I was that was just coming to mind. Yes.
So that is, I think they were a somewhat prominent, black hat hacker group, and they revealed that their kind of initial point of entry was they just called the tech support line and they found some admin's email and they're like, hey, I'm whatever admin, I'm locked out, my can you reset my password, and they just did it, and suddenly they're in to whatever they needed, and I'm sure that just got them to their next step to find some other credential that got them into the server, or who knows. um, but I think that is overlooked in media as like a really common first step for these groups to get what they need.
Wow. I think hacker, and I don't think kid from Jurassic Park, but I do think somebody in a basement just typing away for a longer amount of time and finally getting in, but that would bypass so much of the difficulty. You just ask or you figure out some sort of ruse.
Yeah,
Huh.
exactly. Yeah, I think it's a lot more of a complex thing than just some linear like, here's the server IP address, I'm gonna hack in. Like it's a lot more pieces that kind of have to fall into place, and more of those are less technical than people might think.
Hmm. Which would make it better as a storytelling kind of device. So it's a shame that people aren't taking
Yeah,
advantage of it.
and
It's
maybe they
easier to
are.
show.
Definitely. And yeah, and maybe they are. But I think like you said,
That's what I've seen.
if that's not the main point, it's they're doing what you're saying or what you said is they're just pulling up their laptop and suddenly they're in. And I think even on that part of it, the technical side of it, I'm sure that the speed of things is hugely exaggerated in stories. It's not just something that's going to happen really fast unless you have some really good, flaw that you found that you can get in. I know maybe you've seen this in movies, but there's like brute force hacking where you're basically trying like every combination of a password to get into something, and that takes forever. Because there's just could be billions of possibilities that the computer just has to run through. I don't know how common that is, but that is definitely not something that just happens very quickly. So
Wow, well, this has been really interesting. I hope that people who are out there listening, who write modern, maybe techno thrillers, things like that, got something out of this conversation. I know
yeah.
that I some of my assumptions about tech were reinforced and shown to be true, and uh, others not so much. But um, yeah, thank you so much for joining me this
Absolutely.
afternoon and letting me pick your brain a little bit about
Absolutely.
what
Yeah,
writers
thank you
get
for having
wrong
me.
because, you know, it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, and I hope that, if anybody watches this and they know more about me than some of the things we talked about, that they'll leave a comment and help me learn a little bit too.
Definitely. Yeah, let's make this a conversation. Check out the comments down below and add your own. If you are in, a different related field, we'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for joining us. Like this video if you like it, subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you next week. Bye.